Roger's position in general is you want to hack the body to bang pleasure out of it, do as much as possible, do as much as you can, really knock yourself out. He's much more extreme in that sense than most progressive atheists, immoralists. Very few of those people would tell you should actually reduce longevity in order to enjoy a good smoke. But his point is, bodily pleasures never work if you pursue them as bodily pleasures. Roger Scruton says, when you look around you at the world, you see things that are people and things that are not people. And the difference is very simple and very profound. If something is a person, there are all kinds of things that you immediately know about them. For example, you know that you have to, if you want them to do something for you or with you, you have to secure their cooperation. That's the most basic thing. Because persons are free. If you look at a dog, for example, if you want a dog to behave a certain way, you train them. You don't try to persuade them, you just train them. Because dogs are not free. But you're not allowed to train persons. Training persons is at best manipulative, at worst sadistic. Right? I can't hit you over the nose until you behave the way I want you to behave. Because persons are invitations to relating. Persons have a subjective point of view on the world that they can express, which means they have a perception of themselves as persons, and they also have a perception of me as persons. They can judge me. They can judge themselves. They can give me reasons for what I do or against what I do. And that means that we can enter into a kind of cooperation with persons, a kind of joint creation of our lives, that is not possible with anything that is not a person. To put it very simply, only people can love. And in a way, love is the love of people. There's nothing worthy of love except people or something that has some kind of personal aura around it. You know, like, for example, you can love your hometown, but your hometown wouldn't be your hometown if it wasn't for all the people who lived there when you were growing up. A town becomes a town because of the people who lived there. So in the end, love is about people. And we can love each other because we're people. So now the question is, why? Why do people offer these unique opportunities for relating in a way that you can only relate to people? And the short answer is that they can talk, but specifically that they can talk in very specific ways. They have a language, we have control of a language that has concepts in it. And those concepts allow us to make distinctions, to make judgments about the world. The most basic judgment is the difference between appearance and reality, right? So, you know, everybody likes to talk about the Matrix, how we could all be in the Matrix. Of course, that's not an original idea. That idea goes at least as back as René Descartes to the origins of modern philosophy. But the basic idea of the Matrix is all of this may be an appearance. The reality may be something completely different, right? Now, only people can make this distinction. There is no question of whether your cat asks itself whether it's in the Matrix or not, because your cat can't understand the difference between being in the Matrix and not being in the Matrix. We understand the difference. So appearance and reality. Now, from that difference comes another basic distinction, which is self and not self. How does that come from appearance and reality? Because the self is exactly that part of the world where there is no distinction between appearance and reality. So, you know, for example, I could be hallucinating. I could believe that I'm seeing you here, and in reality you're not there. But I can't be wrong that I believe I'm seeing you here. I can't be wrong about that. Why can't I be wrong about that? Because there is no distinction between appearance and reality when you're talking about things that are part of the self, like my present experience of the world, right? And from that, you immediately get another distinction, and that's the distinction between subject and object. I am a subject because I have a self. I have this realm of experience where there is no distinction between appearance and reality. There are things in the world that are not subjects, they are objects. Objects are things where there is no private point of view that they have in the world. So subjects, and then rational subjects like you and me, I think, are actually subjects in the full sense. They're also characterized by the fact that they can speak to us about their experience. They can tell us what they're experiencing. And then Roger says, in that context, truthfulness is the guarantee of truth. No one can be wrong about their subjective experience. They can lie about it. But if they're telling the truth, we know that they can't be mistaken. So Roger calls this first-person authority. First-person authority is that thing that only subjects have, where they can tell you what their present experience is, and you can't tell them how do you know that. And again, the interesting thing about that is they don't know how they know it. I don't know how I know what my subjective experience is. Like, I'm in pain. How do I know that I'm in pain? I don't know. Which again points you back to the fact that being a person is actually kind of scary. You have this first-person authority, and that gives you, it's your entry ticket into the interpersonal realm. It's what allows you to be a person amongst other persons. It gives you the most important thing about you, which is your rational nature. But what does it depend on? What does this rational nature depend on? It depends on nothing. There is no basis whatsoever. You know, if you're in pain and you tell me you're in pain and I ask you, well, what's your basis for this claim? You will never be able to give me an answer to that. So it's actually kind of scary to be a subject. Now, subjects have first-person authority not just about their present states. They also have first-person authority about their intentions. You know, if I declare to you that I'm going to take up the trash, that's an intention. Again, truthfulness is the guarantee of truth, as Roger says. I could be lying, but if I'm not lying, then I'm telling you what my real intention is. I'm giving you a kind of surety of what my future is, which means that I'm connected to my future in a certain way. Now, yeah, I mean, you know, I could change my mind or something could happen to prevent me. But under normal circumstances where people declare intentions, they carry them out. So you have access to my future through my first-person authority. And not only that, you can also argue with me. You can give me reasons why I shouldn't take the trash. And I can consider your reasons, and I could decide for or against them, and I could change my mind and make a different declaration of intention, which means I'm free. So you see what's fascinating about this definition of persons is that it shows you how being a person really results from our way of relating to each other. What makes you a person is that you can do all of these things that I just said. You can give me an account of your subjective experience. You understand that when you're speaking about your subjective experience, you can be mistaken. If you think you can be mistaken, then you're not talking about your subjective experience, right? So if I ask you, are you in pain right now or not? And you said, I don't know, let me look in the mirror and we'll see if I'm making any grimaces, any pained expressions on my face, and then maybe I'll have an idea of whether or not I'm in pain. Right? If you said that, you would clearly not be talking as a subject. And I wouldn't be able to relate to you interpersonally, because you wouldn't be able to give me any information about yourself in the first person. So persons are a kind of achievement that we achieve together by interacting in a certain way, that only we can interact. There are lots of people these days who will tell you that there is no such thing as a person in the way that we usually think about persons. Because persons are unique, persons are irreplaceable, persons are individuals, persons have subjective experiences, persons are free, persons are morally responsible, persons have infinite moral value. All of these things that are true of persons, they are identical with themselves over time. They have a self. Right? So you have plenty of people today who don't even agree with those basic premises. And I think unless and until you agree with that, unless and until you understand that you're a person, then the question of happiness is completely meaningless. Because only persons can be happy. You know, inanimate objects can't be happy, and animals that aren't persons can be pleased. They can experience positive emotions, but they can't be happy in the deep sense of happiness that philosophers talk about when they talk about human happiness. Because human happiness is not just about feeling good, it's about judging your experience in a certain way. You can be happy even feeling bad if your judgment is that this bad feeling is, for example, for a good cause that you believe in. You can be happy in suffering. And you can also be completely unfulfilled and depressed in pleasure. So happiness requires judging your enjoyments in a certain way, judging them as valuable, as not just desired but desirable. And that's only available to persons, because only persons are morally responsible And therefore, only persons can make judgments of value. They can make judgments like this is good and not just I like this. You see the difference between these things?
Not just this feels good, but this is good.
Well, it can be this feels good, or it can be I like this for any other reason. It's not about sensations versus things that are not sensations. It's about whether you judge this as, you approve of this and you approve of yourself in this. Right? So a person can be very happy, for example, doing something very stressful, like I don't know what. Think about a lawyer who is defending a just cause that he believes in. That is not necessarily pleasurable. It's not necessarily even nice, but a person can be very happy doing that because of the judgment that the person has about it. So happiness requires judgments of value. Now, where do judgments of value come from? They come from persons, because in the end, value enters the world through persons. If you think about it this way, if you remove all the persons from the world, what would have value and to whom? There would be nothing that could perceive values without persons. But once you have persons, you have value, you have things that are so valuable that they're priceless. Like, for example, the Notre Dame Cathedral that burned down and they rebuilt it. They rebuilt it because what exactly is the value of Notre Dame Cathedral? It's not calculable in terms of money. They could have just demolished the ruins and built a skyscraper and made lots and lots of money in the center of Paris. But they didn't do that because Notre Dame has infinite value. And it's the same with a person's children, for example. How much value do your children have? Well, most people wouldn't sell their children for any amount of money. Some people do sell their children. And about these people, what we say is that they are blind in some way. They are blind to life's sources of value. And you think a person who, a person who would sell his own grandmother, in a sense, these are pitiable people, because they may be able, by selling their daughters into sexual slavery, there are stories like that of fathers who do that, may be able to make money, but it's hard to believe that these people can be happy in the deep philosophical sense of happy flourishing, because their ability to value things must be defective. Right? You can be very poor and in many ways not fortunate and still value your family and have happiness in your family. But if you're not able to value even something like your own children, then what possibly could satisfy you in life? So everyone who tells us that we shouldn't think we are people, we shouldn't think we are free, we shouldn't think that we are anything more than machines or animals or our genes or anything like that, they are denying our personality. And if you deny our personality, I claim there's no point talking about happiness, because happiness requires judgments of value. And judgments of value only exist where people exist. Now, what's great about Roger is that he gives us, and we might get into this more later, but he gives us very strong reasons to believe that people actually exist, even if you don't believe that we have supernatural souls, even if you are a reductionist, naturalist person like Richard Dawkins, who says that we're just, how does he put it? We're lumbering gene robots. Our genes build us so they can make copies of themselves. And Roger's point is that may be completely true, but persons are still a real thing. And a lot of his philosophy is about defending that claim, that persons are real even given the most extreme reductionist naturalist view of the world. Roger Scruton emphasizes persons. And the first point that's very important is because people want to take away our personhood. The other reason it's very important is that Roger Scruton's theory of persons is completely different. It's completely the opposite of most other personalist theories. Because most personalist theories and most theories of humans as rational animals will tell you that we have this nature inside of us that is a higher nature, like a higher soul. Like Aristotle said, we have a rational part of our souls that other animals don't have. And that means that we have something very secure that we can rely on, which is this rationality, this whatever it is that makes us different from other animals. And many arguments, for example, Socrates' argument for immortality basically comes from that. He says that the soul is immortal because it is something separate from the body and special. And in my opinion, it's very difficult to take comfort in that thought anymore these days. Socrates, one of Socrates' most famous arguments for the immortality of the soul is he says, the body has parts, but the soul doesn't have parts. The soul is an absolute individual. And so the body can die because it can dissolve into its part, because that's what death is. But the soul obviously can't die because it can't dissolve into its parts. And this is in the Phaedo, which is the dialogue where Socrates is talking about his coming death. It ends with his death. He drinks poison. He's being executed. And all his disciples are around him and they're crying, they're sad, they're distressed, and he's trying to calm them down and tell them they shouldn't worry. And that's one of the arguments that he gives them for why they should worry. And even then, one of his disciples tells him, you know, I'm not so sure when you tell us that the soul is this absolute individual that is indivisible and so it can't die like the body can die. Because to me the soul seems like a harmony. And what he means by a harmony, he means the music that is created by a lyre. You can think of a guitar, for example. So you have a person playing a guitar. While the person is playing the guitar, something seems to be alive in the room that is not that person and is not the guitar. What is that thing that's living in the room?
Like the music.
The music, right? The music is a kind of living, breathing thing in the room. It has its own existence somehow. And in a sense, its relation to the guitar is like the relation of the soul to the body, because the music is not part of the guitar, and the music is not in any element of the guitar, and it has its own structure that is completely separate from the structure of the guitar, and its own behavior, and in a sense, its own space. Music, Roger Scruton says this very famously when he analyzes music. He says music is something that moves in one-dimensional space. Why one-dimensional? Because music can go up and it can go down. Only up and down, up and down. It can't go left, right, it can't go forward, back. It always goes up and down. The music goes up, and it goes down, like that. Up and down.
All the notes are just up or down?
Yeah, but it's not the notes. That's the amazing thing. Notes can't move, if you think about it. A note, what defines it is its pitch. So something moves. When you're listening to music, you're listening to something move, and it's moving in a space that only has one dimension, just up and down. It's something that moves in a space, but that space is not this space, because this is three-dimensional. So this is a bit, so that's kind of like the soul, which is no dimensions. It moves, it has a life, but without dimensions, unlike your body. Your body has a life in 3 dimensions. Soul has a life in no dimensions. Music has a life in 1 dimension. So by analogy, you can say that harmony to the guitar is kind of like the soul to the body. But the point of that person, I don't remember his name, who's arguing with Socrates, he says, even though it's true that the harmony is in a sense independent of the guitar, if you destroy the guitar, the harmony will disappear. It doesn't go into, harmony heaven, to live happily ever after. It is totally dependent on the guitar. And, there's more and more evidence these days, we can see in more and more ways that our mental life is dependent on our physical body. And there is no proof that it is completely dependent. Some people will tell you there's proof, but there's not. There's a hypothesis that says so. But that it is very, very dependent, there can be no doubt about that. So to understand that to ourselves we're a kind of melody, we're a kind of soul that has no dimensions and has all kinds of other weird properties, like the fact that it has a unique identity that is not based on any attribute that it has. Like what makes you, you. Whatever it is, it couldn't be some attribute that you have, because if it were some attribute that you have, we could copy you. If we took a human and we gave that human all the attributes you have, then that human would be you. But there can't be 2 of you, right? That's impossible. But again, that's not true of any physical object. Physical objects are copyable in that sense. And there are many other things about us that are like that. And so realizing that we are all of these things to ourselves is not reassuring to us in the modern world, I think. Under modernity, after we know everything that we know today about biology and evolution and neuroscience, and also about all the ways, all the different theories of social construction of meaning, and all those different ways that we understand how vulnerable personhood is, The fact that we perceive ourselves in these ways, it's not reassuring. It explains to us the source of our distress. It's very distressing to have to hold these two beliefs about yourself all the time. One, you're free, and the other is you're determined. You're a kind of meat machine. And we all have to walk around today believing both these things. I mean, some people will say they don't believe they're free, they just believe they're meat machines. I say they're full of it, because they can do all of the things that only free things can do, like praise, blame, promise, deliberate about the future, all kinds of, they take responsibility. You know, no one can live without doing these things, and no one can do these things unless they assume themselves to be free. So we all have to believe that we're free, and we also have to also live with this threat all the time that we are not free. And we all have to believe that we are unique and live with this threat that we're actually not unique. We're just a certain configuration of meat that you could recreate. And in many other ways, this insight that we are persons and also animals explains, it doesn't give us this lifeboat, this get out of jail free card that the ancients used to think it gives us. Instead, it does the opposite. It explains why our life is so difficult compared to the life of a cat, say. We have a problem that a cat doesn't have. The problem is that we are persons. Being a person who is also a meat robot is a very threatening experience. And it's a problem that you have to solve. So Roger Scruton, I think, is quite unique in his philosophy because he understands what the problem is. You know, there are people who will say, oh, you don't need to worry because you're not really a person. Forget all about that. You're just a meat machine, and that's fine. That solves all your problems. There are other people who will say, you don't have to worry because you have an immortal soul. How do we know you have an immortal soul? Because you're a person, and only a person, you know, only an immortal soul could be a person. So you don't have to worry about all the meat robot stuff, all this nightmare that you know, there is no love, there's just biochemistry and all those things. You don't have to worry about it because you're actually not that. And both of these people are missing the point completely. The point is that both of these things are true. We're both persons and meat machines, and we have to live with that. And I think that no system that doesn't recognize this fact can help us these days. They're antiquated, all the other systems. They're antiquated because they don't understand this crisis that we've arrived at because of science, because of everything that science teaches us about ourselves, because it's become possible, even easy, to conceive of ourselves as machines and to tear away the veil that shows us as persons to each other. And you need some new thinking to be able to function in this kind of intellectual environment. So the question becomes, first of all, how do you justify the personal point of view on the world? And second of all, if you've accepted the fact that we are persons, there is a justification for seeing ourselves as persons, and being happy depends on being a good person in some way, being a successful person, you know, being a person who enjoys things that he also values. Then you have to understand, how do you do that? And how do you avoid falling into the abyss, into the trap of this existential despair that you can get into when you can't reconcile being a person with being an animal. I think that's the source of a lot of the tragedy we see around us today. A lot of the very broken and lost people we see is they don't see a way to be persons that are also animals. Well, if we are persons, and if persons are created in this interpersonal realm, then we have to live a happy life is to realize our potential as persons. And you have to ask yourself what our potential as persons is. Well, the first thing about persons is that they are interpersonal. So we are not made happy alone. Our happiness depends on sharing with others. That's one thing. The other thing is value. So happiness depends on doing things that we judge to be valuable, not just desired but desirable. We have all kinds of desires. Fulfilling our desires for things that are desirable, that are judged as good, is the key to happiness. And towards that end, we need to develop a point of view. We need to cultivate the point of view that distinguishes between just what I like, what feels right, and what is right. until you cultivate that distinction, you can't be happy, because you can enjoy things, but you can't value them. And to do that, the most basic thing is, first of all, moral goodness, moral virtue. Because moral goodness is life under the recognition that certain things are valuable, specifically persons. The whole idea of the moral life is understanding that every person has infinite moral value. Not just me and my desires, but persons, because they are persons. And I have infinite moral value because I am also a person. That means, for example, I can't use myself, for pleasure, like binging junk food or alcohol or porn, or all of these things are really ways of taking advantage of my animal nature without regard for what about me is valuable as a person. So it changes your relationship with yourself. You have to value yourself as a person to be happy, and you have to value other people as persons to be happy, because only then can you live in that interpersonal world where things have value and not just a price.
So in what situation can you enjoy food?
Well, it's perfectly fine to enjoy food in general. The question is not when you can enjoy food. The question is, how does food relate to happiness? And what Roger says is basically two ways. One way is food relates to happiness in that our animal nature requires food. So you have to eat or you can't be happy, because you will not function as an animal. But what people then do on top of that is they say, not only does my animal nature require food, but my animal nature has this very nice property which it can be hacked, right? Anything that our animal nature requires causes pleasure when we provide it. So I can hack my animal nature. I can stuff myself with donuts, and my body machine will reward me with pleasure when I do that. And that's not a path to happiness. It's a path to addiction, because it gives you empty pleasures. Empty pleasures is exactly when you just value your body as a kind of pleasure machine. All these people on social media who talk about dopamine, and some of them talk about dopamine in the context of, for example, they'll say you need to get off addictive behaviors because you're getting addicted to dopamine, and therefore you can't enjoy all kinds of things. And that's very, I think, a very evil way of understanding it, but it's still at least trying to go in the right direction. But there's a more evil way of understanding it, which is saying, dopamine equals pleasure. Pleasure is good, therefore you should do things that give you more dopamine. And both of these things are completely mistaken, because they're confusing pleasure with goodness. Chasing after dopamine is exactly missing the point. What makes a certain enjoyment good is not whether or not dopamine is involved. It's possible that dopamine is involved in every enjoyment. I don't know. No one knows. But some enjoyments are good and some enjoyments are bad. And that's the difference. It's not the presence or absence of dopamine. So you shouldn't be chasing dopamine of any kind. You should be chasing the good. So in the case of food, for example, clearly you have to eat in order for the machine to operate. And it's perfectly all right that you take pleasure in that. Once you start trying to hack the system to get more and more pleasure out of it, you can get into some very dark places. What Roger recommends in general is use the potential of the machine for hacking to achieve some kind of personal goal. So the test, as far as Roger is concerned, is how much it fulfills you as a person. So he would say, for example, Roger was for smoking. He thought smoking was a good idea. His position on that was very simple. He said, smoking relaxes you, smoking gives you energy, smoking gives people an easy way of showing friendliness because they can share smokes, and smoking reduces your longevity, which is very good. Because the last thing you want, especially these days, is this risk of becoming dead before you die and spending, 10, 15 years of your life in some kind of elderly care facility, not even able to remember your own name. And also, he says, just hogging resources, keeping your space on this earth, not allowing the next generation to inherit your space and your resources. So all in all, his opinion is we should try to live shorter lives. But his point is not that we should kill ourselves. His point is you should trade longevity for things that are better than longevity. like mental clarity, like social lubrication, like relaxation. And the same thing he says, for example, he has a whole book about alcohol. He was a very big wine lover, and he says, wine will shorten your life. It's worth it because it will make you a happier person. It is a great facilitator of social interactions. It clarifies the mind for doing philosophy, and it connects you to people because wine is a way of sharing with other people. It opens us up to interpersonal interaction. And actually, if you're a wine lover, like he was, every bottle of wine connects you to people you could never otherwise meet, because people like that know where the wine comes from. They know exactly which village made the wine and what that village's culture is around wine. And it allows you to visit all kinds of communities and have a kind of connection with them through this product that they make. And their traditions and so on. So Roger's position in general is you want to hack the body to bang pleasure out of it. Do as much as possible, do as much as you can, really knock yourself out. He's much more extreme in that sense than most progressive atheist immoralists. Very few of those people would tell you should actually reduce longevity in order to enjoy a good smoke. He is actually much more of an extremist on hedonism in a way. On enjoying bodily pleasures. But his point is, bodily pleasures never work if you pursue them as bodily pleasures. They work when you pursue personal joys and personal values, and those can be served by all kinds of things. They can be served by bodily pleasures. So, for example, he has his whole book about sexual desire, and he doesn't really say that directly, but between the lines you understand that he's basically saying, if you've got this structure of a committed, loving relationship, then you should get as much action as you possibly can. And also do all kinds of kinky stuff. And he has no problem, with pretty wild sexual behavior in that context, which emphasizes the personal meaning of the sex. Otherwise, there's no point, because you're just enslaving yourself to this meat machine and its pleasures. And on the other hand, there are joys and values that you can have as a person that don't depend on bodily pleasures. Listening to music is not exactly a bodily pleasure. There's no part of your body that feels nice when you're enjoying music. And the same is true for, reading poetry, right? Or even doing philosophy. These are all things that can be very enjoyable, especially when you share them with other people, or when they connect you to people in general, because they connect you to a given tradition, right? So you can read philosophy and you can feel actually that you're making friends with Plato. That's still a kind of personal direction. So the important thing is, are you aiming at fulfilling yourself as a person? And then you can do it through bodily pleasures, you can do it through other means. Partly by connecting to other persons, partly by cultivating your own personal nature, which is inherently connected to other persons, but it has other parts. For example, I can give you an example. Roger was a philosopher of art, that was his main specialty. One of the things that you can do to cultivate your personhood is to improve your ability to appreciate art. When you develop your taste in art, you're developing your subjectivity. Remember that subjectivity is one of the things that makes us persons. But a lot of people have a very superficial kind of subjectivity. They're not able to make very fine distinctions in the kinds of experiences they derive. So, for example, they can listen to Lady Gaga and say, this is fun. And then maybe, they can listen to Mozart's The Magic Flute, like, the Papageno aria, and they say, this is fun. And maybe both are fun, but if they can't tell, the distinction between these things, then they don't have a very developed musical sense. So cultivating your ability to, have deeper and better experiences, aesthetic experiences, beyond just fun or not fun, is a way of developing your personhood, which is very interior, but very, very directly related to what makes us what we are.
And if you had to say one sentence, how to live a happy life according to your conclusions of his philosophy?
Well, I don't think it goes with one sentence, but it's be good and pursue your fulfillment as a person and not just as an animal.
Like and subscribe.